I didn't even make it past the old iron gate before she started screaming. "You don't live here anymore." Martha Stone's voice cracked through the mountain air like a whip. She stood there, right on my family's land, surrounded by bright orange trespassing signs she'd nailed to every tree in sight. 3 years, I'd been gone 3 years, not on vacation, not running away, but taking care of my mother while she faded from Alzheimer's. And now, the woman who once borrowed sugar from our porch was shouting like I was the trespasser. The gate creaked behind me when I pushed it open, that same familiar groan that used to mean "welcome home." But this time, it sounded like a warning. The air smelled of pine and dust and something else, bureaucracy. I stared at the signs, property preservation notice, unauthorized access prohibited, safety hazard, do not enter. They were everywhere, nailed to fence posts, trees, even across the front door like crime scene tape. My father built that cabin with his bare hands back in the 70s. Every nail, every board a part of him. Seeing those signs was like watching strangers write over his legacy in orange ink. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this is my family's property. I'm here to clean up, scatter my mom's ashes, and maybe breathe for a minute. That's all." But she didn't flinch. She just held up a clipboard, her weapon of choice. "This property been abandoned," she said, the fake politeness in her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "We're under county contract to secure hazardous structures." Abandoned, that word burned. My mother hadn't even been gone 6 months. I had buried her ashes in the passenger seat beside me on the drive up. And now this woman was telling me my parents' life's work was a hazard. Behind her, 3 men in hard hats and reflective vests were poking around like they owned the place, measuring the porch, taking pictures, even trying the door handle. The sound of a camera shutter cut through the silence like snapping bones. I stepped forward, fists tightening without meaning to. "You're trespassing," I said. "Sir," she replied, calm as a machine. "Any interference will be reported to the sheriff's office." She handed me a thick packet, pages full of legal words meant to scare people into giving up. Temporary preservation order, case N241847. There was a QR code, a deadline, and enough jargon to make anyone believe they'd already lost. That's when I noticed something glinting in the gravel near my boots, Dad's workshop key. It must have fallen out of my wallet. There was a strip of old electrical tape around it with his handwriting. "Bridge emergency only." The words chilled me. Dad was always prepared for everything, storms, repairs, wildfires. But what kind of emergency needed its own bridge key? Before I could ask, Martha's radio crackled. "Phase 1 complete," a voice said. "Begin interior assessment if he leaves." Then static. My gut twisted. Whatever this was, it wasn't about safety. After they left, I sat inside the cabin's kitchen, surrounded by dust, silence, and the faint scent of my mother's lavender sachets. The sun was slipping down behind the pines, turning the air gold. I tried to call every lawyer I could find, flipping through the old phone book Dad kept by the stove. Each call ended the same way. "Sorry, Mr. Miller, we'd need a retainer up front." Up front, I didn't even have enough left to fix the leaky roof. Just as I was about to give up, my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Danny Walsh," said a smooth, confident voice. "I heard you're dealing with a property preservation dispute. I can help." Relief hit me like oxygen. Someone finally understood. He talked fast, knew the 24-hour deadlines, the county forms, even mentioned the sheriff by name. "We'll file an emergency objection tonight," he said. "Stop them cold before they can touch anything else." When he arrived an hour later, he looked like every lawyer commercial I'd ever seen, sharp suit, calm eyes, perfect handshake. He spread papers across the same table my parents used to eat breakfast at and explained everything like a man who'd done this 100 times. "Just sign here," he said, sliding a form toward me. "Limited power of attorney." "Completely standard. It lets me represent you immediately." I hesitated, but he smiled, reassuring, practiced. "Without it, they can take the property by default. You've got one shot, Robert. Don't let them win." The pen felt heavy in my hand. I signed. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, that low, whispering sound the mountains make when they're warning you. And as Danny packed up his briefcase, I caught sight of something on his phone, a quick flash of a message before he locked the screen. He signed, "Proceed to stage 2. He looked up, smiling again. "We're on track," he said. But in that moment I felt it, that old, cold instinct my father taught me to trust. Something about this wasn't help. It was a setup. The morning light hit the cabin like a quiet accusation. Dust floated through the air, catching sunlight in slow motion, the kind of stillness that makes every sound louder than it should be. Somewhere outside, a woodpecker hammered against a hollow trunk. Each echo felt like a countdown I didn't understand yet. Danny had promised to file everything by morning. But when I woke, there was no text, no call, just the sound of a truck engine idling down the hill. I pulled the curtain aside. The same white SUV from yesterday parked halfway up the road. Men in vests again, measuring, photographing. I stepped out onto the porch, or what was left of it. A new orange sign flapped against the railing in the cold breeze. Interior assessment authorized. Authorized by who? I thought I had stopped that. I dialed Danny. He answered on the second ring, his tone cooler than before, like the warmth had been part of a sales pitch. "These safety assessments take time," he said. "Time," I snapped. "They're inside my cabin." "Temporary access for structural review," he replied evenly. "Completely legal under county protocol." He was quoting Martha word for word. And just like that, I knew, whatever side Danny was on, it wasn't mine. Through the cracked kitchen window, I could see Martha's crew rifling through Dad's workshop. They weren't assessing anything. They were cataloging. Taking photographs of every tool, every shelf, even Mom's old rocking chair like it was evidence in a case I didn't know I was losing. That's when a soft knock came at the back door. Helen Parker stood there, holding a thermos of coffee and the look of someone who'd already seen too much. "Can we talk privately?" she whispered. We walked down past the fence line, where the wind carried the scent of pine and damp soil. "I shouldn't be saying this," she began, eyes darting toward the cabin, "but Martha's done this before." She told me about the Petersons, a family 3 valleys over who lost their land the same way. Same company, same orange signs. They never fought back, and within months, their cabin became part of a new eco-retreat development. Helen reached into her coat and handed me a small envelope. Inside were photographs, Martha in meetings with men in suits, shaking hands over survey maps. "Your father saw it coming," she said. "He filed historical preservation papers years ago. Said one day someone would come for this land." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Dad had always seemed paranoid about paperwork, always hiding documents in labeled metal boxes, marking things like water rights and survey logs. I thought it was just his way of feeling in control after Mom got sick. Now it made sense. Back at the cabin, Danny was gone, but his car was, parked right next to Martha's truck at the water access point. I crept close enough to see them both, heads bent over a map, pointing, smiling like partners closing a deal. My stomach turned. I raised my phone and started filming. When they spotted me, Martha didn't even flinch. Danny straightened his tie and gave that same professional smile. "Interesting place for a legal consultation," I said, my voice shaking. "Nothing personal, Robert," he replied. "Just business." Martha folded her arms. "You signed the paperwork yourself," she said smugly. And in that moment, I realized what I'd done. The power of attorney I'd signed wasn't protection, it was permission. I'd handed them the keys to destroy me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked with the weight of every memory my parents left behind. Every board of the cabin felt like it was watching, waiting for me to do something. I spread out the paperwork Danny gave me, reading line after line until my eyes burned. Every clause led to one truth: I had no control. Not legally, not financially, not even physically, they could walk onto my property anytime under public safety authorization. Then the sound of tires on gravel. A single headlight swept across the window. I ducked behind the counter. The SUV stopped for a few seconds, then rolled on. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You have until tomorrow. Don't interfere again." The words blurred on the screen as my pulse thundered in my ears. That night I drove to the old bridge, the one where Mom and Dad had their first date, the same bridge Dad mentioned on the key tag. Moonlight shimmered over the creek. I crouched near the wooden rail, searching the support beams, running my fingers under each plank. Then I found it, a small metal box bolted to the underside, sealed tight and wrapped in old oilcloth. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents, land survey maps, notarized pages stamped with Federal Historical Protection Act, 1995. Dad had been right. He'd protected this place long before Martha ever showed up. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke from somewhere down the road. My gut twisted. That wasn't campfire smoke, it was engine exhaust. Headlights again. 2 trucks this time, crawling down the access road toward the cabin. I crouched in the shadows, the sound of gravel crunching under tires echoing through the valley. Martha's voice carried through the night, calm, cold, and certain. "Phase 2, she said into her radio. "He won't be a problem after tonight." I gripped the metal box tighter, feeling the weight of my father's foresight in my hands. And for the first time since coming home, I knew this wasn't about one cabin. It was war for the land itself. By the time I made it back up the hill, dawn was just starting to break, a thin silver line slicing through the trees. The cabin looked smaller somehow, boxed in by orange signs, and the silhouettes of trucks parked along the road like sentinels. Martha's crew was already there, moving with the precision of people who weren't afraid of being caught. The smell of gasoline and sawdust filled the air. They'd started dismantling Dad's porch, the same one he built by hand, board by board, during the summer of '79. I froze. The sound of a power saw roared to life, chewing through wood that still carried my father's initials carved under the railing. It was like hearing a family heirloom scream. I marched straight toward them, shouting over the noise. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of the men glanced at me, then at Martha, who stood calmly off to the side, clipboard tucked under her arm like a sword. "Structural review and debris mitigation," she said smoothly. "The foundation's compromised." "That porch outlasted 2 blizzards and an earthquake," I shot back. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Unverified construction doesn't meet safety codes. We're protecting the community." That word again, community, it made my skin crawl. When I tried to step closer, one of the men blocked my path, his gloved hand landing heavy on my shoulder. His eyes told me everything. They weren't contractors. They were enforcers. I backed off, but not before spotting something that made my blood boil: Dad's memorial carving for Mom, the one he made from a single piece of oak during her final year. It was lying in the dirt, split clean down the middle. Someone's tool had gone straight through it. "Unfortunate," Martha said when she caught my stare. "Collateral damage during stabilization." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just bent down, running my thumb along the splintered edge where my father's craftsmanship had been destroyed. The blood that welled up from the cut felt like it belonged to both of us. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to town, looking for anyone who would listen. But every door I knocked on came with polite refusals. Some neighbors wouldn't even meet my eyes. By the time I reached Helen's house, she already had the news on. Martha was hosting a community safety meeting that night at the town center. Her name flashed on the local bulletin, framed by words like fire risk and abandoned structure initiative. I drove there just before sunset, gripping Dad's metal box like a lifeline. The community hall was packed, every folding chair filled, people standing in the back, nodding along to Martha's speech like she was their savior. Her tone was perfect, calm, professional, full of civic concern. "Unattended properties are a major hazard," she said, pointing to a slide showing my cabin surrounded by red circles and warning labels. "We've seen what happens when neglect endangers the mountain." Neglect, that word cut deeper than any insult. When she finally called for questions, I stood. "This isn't neglect," I said. It's my home. I've been taking care of my dying mother for 3 years, and while I was gone, you people broke into my property." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Martha didn't flinch. "We sympathize with your loss, Mr. Miller," she said sweetly. "But grief doesn't excuse non-compliance with safety regulations." The room turned quiet. Then came the whispers, the side glances, and I realized her plan wasn't just to take my land. It was to isolate me, make me look unstable, dangerous, unfit. When the meeting ended, no one spoke to me. Not Helen, not the mail carrier, not even Tommy, the kid who used to fish with me down by the creek. I drove home through the dark mountain road, headlights sweeping across trees that felt older than justice itself. When I parked, I noticed something new, small red lights blinking near the cabin's fence line. Cameras, hidden in the brush. They weren't assessing anymore, they were watching. The next morning, the boy himself, Tommy, showed up, pale and shaking. "Mister," he whispered, "they said they'd help my mom with her treatment if I told them when you'd be home." I could see the guilt in his eyes. He looked like a kid who just learned how expensive survival really is. Before I could answer, the low growl of an engine echoed through the valley. Not one, 3. SUVs pulling into the gravel drive. The first door slammed open, and Martha's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Robert Miller, you are trespassing on a property under federal safety assessment. Vacate immediately." Tommy's hand trembled in mine. "They said if I didn't help, we'd lose our house too." The forest came alive with movement, beams of light sweeping across the trees, voices barking orders in clipped military cadence. "Target confirmed," someone said over a radio. My father's voice echoed in my head from years ago, soft but certain. "When you're cornered on this mountain, don't run down, go deeper. The land will protect you if you respect it." I grabbed Tommy's wrist and pulled him toward the old mining trail behind the creek. "Come on," I whispered. "They can't follow where the land remembers." Behind us, flashlights cut through the dark, and Martha's amplified voice rang out again, calm, cruel, absolute. "Proceed to containment grid. He won't get far." Her words bounced off the rocks and echoed through the forest like a promise. And as we disappeared into the mountain's shadow, I finally understood the truth Dad had buried here decades ago. They weren't just taking land. They were erasing legacies. The forest swallowed us whole. Branches whipped at my face as we ran, the night alive with echoes of pursuit, boots crunching gravel, radios crackling, the steady hum of engines circling closer. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of pine and fear. Tommy stumbled once, nearly going down, but I grabbed his arm and pulled him back to his feet. "Stay close," I whispered. "Follow the creek." He nodded, breath coming in ragged bursts. He was just a kid, maybe 13, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone twice his age. Behind us, Martha's voice bled through the loudspeakers again, distorted by the trees. "Mr. Miller, this is your final warning. You're trespassing on a restricted site." Her tone was calm, almost maternal, like she was trying to convince herself she was the good guy. We cut through the undergrowth until the sound of water drowned everything else. The creek glimmered faintly under the moonlight. My father had once called this place the mountain's pulse. I understood now, it was more than water, it was direction. It always led home. "Down there," I said, pointing to a rocky drop-off that looked impassable. "There's an old mining shack below that ridge." Tommy looked terrified. "They said this area was off-limits, dangerous." "Yeah," I said, "that's why it's safe." We half slid, half fell down the embankment, landing in a patch of wet moss and mud. The old shack appeared through the fog like a memory, weathered boards, rusted roof, and a single lantern hook swaying in the breeze. It looked abandoned, it was. When I forced the door open, dust poured out like smoke, but inside everything was alive. Rows of old equipment lined the walls, monitors, trail cameras, hard drives, and cables that looked decades out of place. My father's handwriting was everywhere. On masking tape labels, on map pins, on notebooks stacked high and yellowed with age. Tommy's voice cracked the silence. "What is this place?" I ran my hand along the nearest shelf, brushing off a layer of dust until I found a word written in black marker. Surveillance. Dad hadn't built a workshop down here. He built a war room. I powered one of the monitors on, half expecting it to be dead after all these years. But when the screen flickered to life, my stomach dropped. Feed after feed appeared, camera angles I recognized. The cabin, the workshop, the creek, even the road where Martha's trucks had parked. He'd been watching them long before they'd ever realized he could. One video played automatically. The timestamp was from months before I returned. The screen showed Danny Walsh, the man who'd pretended to be my lawyer, surveying my property. He had a transit level set up, measuring water lines and soil grades, taking photos just like Martha's crew. I froze the frame and zoomed in. Danny wasn't surveying for legal reasons. He was scouting for construction. Tommy leaned closer, his face lit by the cold blue light. That's him, the guy who came to our house. He told my dad to sign something too. My throat went dry. They've done this before, haven't they? He nodded. They said if we didn't cooperate, we'd lose our house and Mom's treatment. My father's voice echoed in my memory from one of his old cassette tapes I'd played as a kid. They'll come for the land, not the people. The people are just in the way. The next file I opened was labeled Bridge Archive. It showed meetings, Martha, Danny, and two men in suits I didn't recognize. They stood by the creek, pointing at survey maps. Their conversation was faint but clear enough to catch one line that made my blood run cold. Water rights alone are worth $20 million once we clear the title. Tommy looked at me wide-eyed. $20 million. Yeah, I said quietly. That's why they're doing this. The videos kept going, weeks of secret recordings showing Martha's trucks moving in and out of private properties. Inspection teams removing documents, and one frame that froze me entirely. A woman I'd never seen before, wearing a county badge, handing Martha a sealed envelope. The audio clicked in mid-sentence. Federal clearance signed, proceed with acquisition. That's when the radio in the shack came alive, a voice urgent and sharp. Target has accessed historical documentation. Proceed to stage 3. Tommy jumped, nearly knocking over a box. I muted the feed immediately, heart pounding. They're talking about us, I whispered. We could hear engines in the distance again, not just trucks this time, but helicopters. The low, rhythmic chop of blades beating against the thin mountain air. They know, Tommy said softly. They know we found something. I turned off every light in the shack. The glow of the monitor died, leaving us in complete darkness except for the moonlight seeping through the cracks in the roof. They can take the property, I said, voice low, but not the truth. My dad made sure of that. Tommy's phone buzzed suddenly, a text from an unknown number. He showed it to me, hands trembling. They know you're with him. Go home now or we stop paying for your mom's care. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The mountain was silent except for the distant echo of rotor blades. Then I reached for my father's old camera, the same one he used for his land surveys, and looked Tommy dead in the eye. If we go down, I said, we're taking their lives with us. Somewhere in the darkness outside, a voice shouted coordinates. The forest answered with a sharp gust of wind that carried pine needles against the shack's tin roof. And I swear I heard it, faint but real, my father's voice again, carried in that mountain wind. Everything you need is at the bridge. I looked at Tommy. We're going back. The night air cut cold against my face as we climbed back toward the ridge. The forest was quiet now, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Even the insects had gone still. Every sound we made felt amplified, every crack of a twig like thunder. Tommy walked behind me, flashlight dimmed to a thin beam. The moon was our guide, silver and sharp, painting the trees in pale light. Why the bridge? He whispered. Because that's where my dad left everything that mattered, I said. He always said the bridge was where the land remembers. When we reached the creek, mist hung low over the water, swirling around our legs like smoke. The old bridge stood ahead, dark and skeletal, wood slick with dew. The sound of running water echoed underneath like a heartbeat. I knelt near the same spot where I'd found the metal box before. This time I looked deeper. My hands traced along the underside beams until my fingers brushed something rough, a metal latch, hidden beneath layers of grime and rust. I pried it open with Dad's old pocket knife, and a compartment slid loose. Inside were two small canisters, tightly sealed. The first held a roll of 35mm film. The second, a folded map with coordinates and a handwritten note that made my stomach twist. If you're reading this, they came sooner than I expected. Don't trust the county, follow the blue line. Tommy leaned closer. What's the blue line? I spread the map under the flashlight. A faint blue mark wound from the cabin all the way down to a section labeled Reservoir 14. It's a water channel, I said. An underground flow path. Dad mapped it decades ago. A sudden crack of branches froze us both. Headlights flickered through the trees. Voices. They're here, Tommy whispered. We ducked under the bridge just as a truck stopped at the edge of the creek. Boots hit the ground. I could see Martha's silhouette against the beams of light, calm, deliberate, flashlight in hand. Search the area, she ordered. The data box is missing. I held my breath, gripping the map so tightly it crumpled in my fist. Tommy was trembling beside me, his hand pressed against the dirt to keep from gasping. Two men moved down to the creek bank, scanning with thermal goggles. The water reflected red and gold patterns against their faces. One of them kicked at a log, the same one hiding us, and for a moment I thought it was over. But then a voice called from the truck. "Ma'am, the sheriff's here." Everything stopped. Sheriff Briggs, broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the mountain itself, stepped out of his cruiser. I hadn't seen him since Dad's funeral. "Martha," he said, his tone sharp, "what the hell is this? I told you to keep your operation within the development perimeter. This property falls under safety." "Save it," he cut her off. "You've pushed this too far. The Miller land's registered historical property, you know that." The air shifted. Her voice stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. "Not anymore," she said. "The preservation clause was revoked last month, signed by your office." I could see it, the flicker in the sheriff's eyes, the sudden guilt. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "I never signed." And then he froze. Danny Walsh stepped out from the shadows, holding a clipboard. "You did, Sheriff. Electronic authorization. We've got it on record." Sheriff Briggs turned pale. "That's not my—" But Danny cut him off, smiling thinly. "Then you must have been hacked. Either way, it's done." I watched it unfold from under the bridge, anger burning hot behind my ribs. They had everything, the power, the paperwork, even the law itself. And yet, in that moment, I realized something. If Dad had hidden these coordinates, he hadn't been trying to protect the land. He'd been trying to protect proof. When the trucks finally pulled away, we crawled out from the shadows. The sheriff stayed behind, staring at the creek. I approached quietly. "Briggs," I said. He turned, startled, then sighed. "Robert, what have you gotten yourself into?" "I should be asking you that." I held up the map. "My dad left evidence. They're stealing more than property. They're rerouting water rights, all tied to Reservoir 14. He looked at the map, eyes narrowing. "That reservoir under federal control." "Not for long," I said. "If they get this land, they own the channel. That's why they're forcing everyone out." The sheriff rubbed his temples, muttering, "I knew Martha was dirty, but I didn't realize how deep it went." He looked up. "You got proof." I handed him one of the film canisters. "It's all in here. Videos, signatures, maybe even more." He hesitated, then pocketed it. "I'll get this developed quietly, but you need to disappear for a while. They're not gonna stop." Tommy's voice cracked. "Where do we go?" The sheriff thought for a moment, then nodded toward the West Ridge. "There's an old ranger station up near Eagle Hollow. Power still works. Hide there till I call." I glanced at the bridge one last time. The wind shifted, and for a second I could swear I heard the faint creak of wood, like the bridge itself was sighing. Before we left, I carved one line into the rail with my father's knife. "The land remembers." As we walked away under the pale light of dawn, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. I felt like I was following something, a trail my father had started long before I ever understood why. And somewhere in that cold mountain silence, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for the truth buried beneath it. By the time we reached Eagle Hollow, the sun had just cleared the ridge. The morning air smelled of pine sap, and burnt coffee from the thermos I'd forgotten was still in my pack. Tommy looked half asleep, half terrified, clutching his backpack like it might shield him from whatever came next. The old ranger station sat on a hill hidden by wild oak and brush. It hadn't been used in years. The roof sagged, the door hung crooked, but when I flipped the breaker, the single overhead bulb flickered to life. The sheriff was right. Power still worked. Inside, everything felt frozen in time. Maps of the forest pinned to the walls, radios stacked on a desk, and a dusty first aid kit from the 90s. The only sound was the faint hum of the light. We both collapsed onto the old couch. My hands were still trembling from everything that had happened. I kept replaying Martha's words in my head, Phase 3. Whatever that meant, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a plan already in motion. Tommy broke the silence. Do you think the sheriff will help us? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe in someone who still wore a badge for the right reasons. Yeah, I said quietly. He's old school, he'll do what's right. But deep down, something gnawed at me, that flicker of fear in Briggs' eyes when Danny mentioned electronic authorization. It wasn't guilt, it was fear of being caught. While Tommy slept, I started sorting through what we had, the second film canister, the map, and my father's old notebook I'd found tucked in the box. Inside were pages of coordinates, chemical readings, even water level data. Every note ended with the same phrase, "They're draining it from underneath." I followed the line on the map that connected our property to Reservoir 14. My father had circled a section marked Valve Access, Private Lease Zone. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a land dispute. It was an operation. Around noon, the sheriff called. His voice was low, steady. "Robert, I got your film developed. You'd better see this in person." "Where?" "Town Hall, side entrance, 15 minutes. I hesitated. Something in his tone felt off, like he was reading from a script. But I didn't have a choice. I woke Tommy, told him to stay put, and left with the film box in my coat. The drive down was quiet, the forest eerily still. When I got to the town hall, the parking lot was empty except for the sheriff's truck. I climbed the back steps and found him waiting in the hallway, holding a thick envelope. "Got it right here," he said. "Footage, stills, timestamps, everything you need to prove your case." For a second, relief washed over me. Then I noticed the sound, faint but distinct, a camera shutter. He saw my eyes shift and smiled weakly, just documenting the evidence chain. But behind him, through the reflection in the window, I saw her. "Martha." She stepped forward, clipboard in hand, the same calm expression she always wore, the look of someone who'd already won. "Robert," she said softly, "I'm glad you came. This will make everything easier." I turned to Briggs, disbelief flooding me. "You set me up." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "They've got my pension, my property, my son's medical records. I didn't have a choice." Anger rose in my throat. "You always have a choice." Martha's voice was ice. "You should have walked away when you had the chance." Two men appeared behind her, the same ones from the bridge, wearing security jackets but carrying sidearms that weren't standard issue. They moved forward, calm and deliberate. I didn't think, I just ran. I bolted through the side door, down the back steps, and into the service alley behind the hall. The shouts followed instantly, "Stop him!" but adrenaline drowned them out. I sprinted to my truck, the envelope still in my jacket. By the time I reached the main road, the blue lights were already flashing in the rearview mirror. "Unauthorized possession of county documents," the radio barked. "Subject is armed and hostile." I wasn't armed, but truth was more dangerous than any weapon they'd planted. I veered off the road, tires kicking gravel, and took the old fire trail back toward the mountain. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number again. They'll raid the station in 10 minutes. Save the boy or save the proof. My heart stopped, Tommy. I slammed the brakes, engine roaring as I reversed and tore through the forest trail. Branches scraped the windshield, dust and leaves blinded me. When I reached the ranger station, it was already surrounded, black SUVs, unmarked, silent. I killed the engine and crept through the brush, every muscle screaming. Through the open window, I saw Tommy, hands up, shaking, a flashlight beam trained on his face. Martha's voice was calm as ever. "He's a minor, we'll handle him gently." She turned away for a moment, and that was enough. I slipped inside from the back, grabbed Tommy's wrist, and whispered, "Go." We ran through the rear exit into the woods as gunmetal light filled the horizon. Shouts echoed behind us, flashlights cutting through the dark. I didn't look back, not once, until we were halfway up the ridge. From there I saw it all, the ranger station engulfed in flames, smoke curling upward, swallowing years of my father's work. Tommy started crying quietly. "All that proof, it's gone." I shook my head, reaching into my pocket. The second film canister was still there, warm from my hand. Not all of it. The firelight reflected off the trees like ghosts of everything we'd lost. And as the mountain wind howled through the valley, I whispered to no one and everyone at once. "You can burn the cabin, you can silence the sheriff, but you can't erase what the land remembers." We didn't stop running until the smoke faded behind the trees. The mountain was quiet again, but this time it wasn't peace, it was grief. The ranger station, my father's secret refuge, his evidence, his legacy, gone in flames that licked the sky like punishment. Tommy was still trembling beside me, every breath sharp and uneven. We huddled near the base of a fallen pine, both too drained to speak. The world smelled of wet earth and ash. I opened my hand. The second film canister lay there, scratched but intact. It felt heavier now, not because of its size, but because of what it carried. Proof, maybe the last piece left. Tommy's voice broke the silence. "What if they find us?" "They will," I said quietly, "but this time we won't be the ones hiding." We waited until dawn painted the mountains gold. My clothes smelled of smoke and rain. My hands shook not from fear, but from the weight of choice. Do we keep running or turn and fight? I thought about my dad, how he never raised his voice, how he fought every battle with patience instead of fists. He believed the truth was like water. It always found its way through rock. And maybe that's what this was about, not the cabin, not the land, but letting the truth carve its way free. We hiked down to Helen's house just as the morning fog lifted. She opened the door, eyes red like she hadn't slept. "I saw the fire from the ridge," she whispered. "They said you started it." "Of course they did," I said bitterly. "That's how they work." She let us in, locking the door behind her. The small kitchen smelled of coffee and old pine cleaner. On the table sat an open laptop and a portable scanner. "You were right," she said. "I've been collecting records since this started. Deeds, contracts, maps, Martha's signatures are on all of them. Different names, same handwriting." I placed the film canister next to her laptop. "Can you digitize this?" She hesitated. "If it's old 35, maybe, but you'll need a darkroom or an adapter. The nearest one's in Franklin County." "That's 3 hours away," I said. She nodded. "Then we'd better leave now." Before we could pack, headlights swept across her window. 3 vehicles, black SUVs again. Tommy peeked through the curtain. "It's them." Helen's hands shook as she whispered, "Back door, go." We slipped out through the kitchen and into the woods behind her property. I could hear Martha's voice outside, calm, professional, too confident. "No need to knock. We have a warrant." We climbed the hill in silence, the forest floor soft beneath our boots. By the time we reached the old service road, the sound of voices had faded. Helen's house disappeared behind a curtain of fog. The drive to Franklin was long and tense. Every car that passed made my pulse spike. Tommy sat quietly, staring out the window. "Do you think she'll be okay?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. By the time we reached town, the sun was low, a dull red disk behind the ridge. The camera shop sat between an antique store and a closed diner. one of those old places that smelled like dust and developer chemicals. The man behind the counter looked like he'd been there since the 80s. I handed him the canister. "Can you process this? It's urgent." He squinted. "Film that old, give me 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt longer than 3 years. When he came back, he was holding a USB drive and a worried expression. "Whatever's on here, you might want to be careful who sees it." "What do you mean?" He handed me a sheet of thumbnails, blurry, but clear enough. Photos of blueprints, construction schematics, and signatures with county seals. Then one image stopped me cold, a printed memo stamped with the state emblem. Water Diversion Initiative, Private Infrastructure Development Partnership. At the bottom, 3 signatures. Daniel Walsh, Martha Stone, Sheriff Briggs. Tommy whispered, "They all signed it." I nodded slowly. And now the whole town's drinking poisoned water from a dry mountain they stole. Helen texted me an hour later. "They raided my house, I'm okay, go public." I stared at those 2 words, go public. And suddenly, everything clicked. Dad didn't just collect evidence, he built a story the world couldn't ignore. The maps, the recordings, the warnings, he didn't hide them out of fear. He hid them so they'd survive him. I uploaded the files from the USB drive to an old social page linked to Dad's Land Survey Association. Every document, every image, every signature, public timestamped, archived. Then I posted one message under his old account name. They called it preservation, it was profit, they called it safety, it was theft. The mountain remembers. Within an hour, the post started spreading. Local reporters called. Environmental groups messaged. Then the sheriff's department issued a statement, no comment during active investigation. Tommy watched the screen light up as messages poured in. "It's working," he said, voice trembling with hope. "Not yet," I said quietly. "They'll try to shut it down." And they did. Within 2 hours, every video link disappeared, accounts suspended, access revoked. But it didn't matter, because the files had already been downloaded, shared, duplicated. Truth has a way of surviving. Even fire can't kill it. That night I parked the truck near the bridge again, the same creek that started it all. The mist rolled in, cool and quiet. Tommy leaned on the rail beside me. "What happens now?" I looked out over the water. The moon reflected off it like a silver wound healing slowly. "Now," I said, "now we wait for the land to do what it always does, remember." And somewhere in that endless whisper of pine and river, I thought I heard my father's voice again, soft, steady, proud. "You did good, son." It took 3 weeks for everything to unravel. The first headline hit small, local HOA faces allegations of land misuse. By morning, it was everywhere. Satellite maps, leaked permits, drone footage, all pieced together by strangers who cared more about truth than the people paid to protect it. Martha Stone's name was plastered across every news feed. Community president accused of water rights fraud. Developer partnership tied to displaced residents. Her calm voice, the same one that once ordered men to tear down my porch, now trembled in court footage, pleading ignorance. Danny Walsh was nowhere to be found. Rumor had it he left the state the same night the first report went public. Sheriff Briggs resigned before the investigation reached him. They called it retirement, but the community knew. His cruiser sat parked outside the station one last time, the same truck that once carried my father's folded flag. Tommy's family got their house back. The HOA quietly dissolved after the county froze all its accounts. But the damage was done. Families had already moved away. Forest paths were scarred by machinery that would never be replaced by trees in my lifetime. As for me, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I came back to the cabin one cold morning just before winter. The air was sharp, biting at my cheeks. Frost clung to the trees and the creek whispered under a thin sheet of ice. The porch was gone, the front door scarred by locks I didn't put there, but the cabin still stood, stubborn, weathered, alive. Inside, the dust had settled like snow. My father's tools still hung where he left them. Mom's lavender sachets had lost their scent, but not their memory. I set my bag down on the table, the same one Danny once spread his fake contracts on, and looked around. Everything was quieter now, not peaceful, just honest. For a while, I just listened. The old wood creaked like an old man's bones, and the stove gave a hollow echo when I tapped it. I could almost hear Dad humming in the next room, the way he used to when the weather turned. Then I stepped outside and nailed something new to the front gate. A single wooden sign, burned at the edges. Private property, historical preservation land. Do not remove. It wasn't defiance, it was closure. Helen came by that afternoon, bundled in a heavy coat. She stood at the gate, smiling faintly. Looks like the mountain one after all. I shook my head. No, it just remembered who it belonged to. She told me the county was reopening an inquiry into every HOA deed in the region. Turns out your dad's name on more preservation filings than anyone knew, she said. He wasn't paranoid, Robert. He was protecting everyone. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the clouds roll over the ridge. Then she added softly, people are calling it the Miller case now. Your dad would have been proud. Maybe, but pride wasn't what I felt. It was something quieter, the kind of peace that comes after you've run out of anger. When she left, the sun dipped low and the forest turned gold. I sat on the steps that used to lead to the porch, listening to the creek down below. The wind moved through the pines like a low hymn. Tommy had sent me a message earlier that day. We're moving back. Mom says thank you. She wants to bring you pie. I smiled. It wasn't victory, but it was life starting again. That night, I lit a small fire in the old stove and pulled out my father's notebook one last time. The final page was blank except for one line, written in his uneven handwriting. When they take everything, remember, the land keeps the truth. Outside, snow began to fall, slow, quiet, soft as forgiveness. The flames danced against the cabin walls, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting anymore. I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence, "You were right, Dad," it remembered. The creek murmured in reply. Somewhere far off, an owl called, low, mournful, eternal. When I finally stepped outside, the snow had covered the tracks leading up the hill. No sign of trucks, no orange notices, no loud voices. Just the mountain, calm, patient, unbothered. I stood there for a long time, breathing it in, the cold air, the faint scent of pine smoke, the stillness of a place that had been wronged but refused to die. And as the snow kept falling, covering the scars and the ash, I realized the truest thing my father ever taught me. You can own land on paper. You can fence it, name it, pave it. But you can't possess it. Because the earth never really belongs to us. We belong to it. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.